All right, guys. Ceremony Yami is a bit of an odd beast when it comes to Black Clover Mobile because he doesn't quite fit in with the normal builds that you would kind of do for other characters. The way you want to upgrade his skills is a bit weird. The talent you want to run on him doesn't quite make sense. The gear is fairly normal for the most part, but then like his teams and stuff, like he's just one of those units who I wouldn't say is super meta, but he could be useful. He does a lot of different things. I don't know. Let's just hop into it and start talking about it. So we're going to talk about his skills, what skills you want to upgrade first, what skill cards you want to run on him, what gear you want to run on him, whether or not you should enhance him, what talents you want to do on his talent tree, and then of course what teams he's going to fit on for both PvP and PvE. So starting with his passive, this is a passive you get for getting him just to LR status. It grants 30% increased damage dealt when attacking a defender type unit. This is really good considering the other stuff he does later on that we're going to talk about with his skills. His skills give him a lot of defense penetration and stuff like that. So including this extra damage dealt against defender type units is especially good when you consider that Yami is a green type unit and one of the most meta units in the game right now is a red defender being Black Asta. So this is going to help him just have at least a little bit more of a chance against the current meta, which is Black Asta, who is just insanely good. Now his skill 1 is called Continuous Slash. It is a single target attack, and so what this is going to do is it deals 50% of attack and magic attack as extra damage. You do still want to just build him for attack, don't worry about building him for magic attack, but it does 50% of both of these as extra damage. And then upon using skill 1, the number of instances of extra damage increases max up to 4 times, so this is going to give him a lot of extra damage on his skill 1, meaning his skill 1 is going to be one of his hardest hitting skills. And then also it grants an increased speed level 1 buff for 1 turn if you have his skill page. This doesn't sound like a lot when you read increased speed level 1, but that is a 35% speed increase, meaning he will get his turn more often, meaning he will get more chances to skill 1 hopefully than other characters, and that will allow him to do extra damage. So that is actually really good if you have his skill page equipped to have this extra skill on his skill 1. So his skill 1 is very good. His skill 2, I actually really like this skill 2 as well. It is an AoE attack, and he attacks after removing counterattack from an enemy, which is nice. So you can remove that counterattack from like if they're running a blue team with luck. And then if an enemy is taking continuous bleed damage, inflicts a stun status element on them for 1 turn. That is a guaranteed stun, AoE guaranteed stun if the whole enemy team is bleeding. Like, I think this Yami's a little bit underrated because I think that utility right there is really good. That is really good in my opinion. And then if an enemy is not taking continuous bleed damage, inflicts continuous bleed damage on them for 2 turns. So if you can run him with like other bleed characters, that can be insanely good, right? So keep that in mind. And then his special skill, there's just so much going on here, right? But grants self 100% of attack as a barrier for 2 turns, which is good whenever he uses his special. Removes all instances of continuous damage, and this is why you want to build him for attack, right? This barrier right here, this is why you don't want to do a split build, by the way. And then when instances of extra damage of skill 1 are at their max, it will give this skill, the special skill, a defense penetration level 5 buff, which is insane. Ignores 50% of enemies' defense and then deals damage. And then when instances of extra damage of skill 1 are at their max once again, attacks after granting a 300% increased damage dealt buff. That is basically a guaranteed nuke on your special skill if you have 5 stacks of extra damage on your skill 1. Now the thing is, you have to wait a long time before using your special essentially to get this full effect, which means if you don't have those extra stacks of damage, you don't get any of this. It doesn't matter. So like this skill is very bad if you don't have those extra stacks of damage. That's why this character is so weird, right? And then when the instances of extra damage of skill 1 are at their maximum upon using skill 1, the instances of extra damage are reset. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. So just a lot of really weird stuff going on with this Yami, but because of that, in terms of upgrade priority, I would probably go for skill 1 first because you're going to be using that the most. Then I would go for skill 2, or not skill 2, sorry, the special skill, because this is going to be your nuke. It's going to do a lot of damage, so I'd upgrade your special skill second because it's going to be a nuke. And then this right here is really just utility. It's not ever going to do the most damage, and upgrading it doesn't really do anything else for you, so I do your skill 2 last. And then technically for the very last, I would do the combo skill, which attacks after removing a counter attack just like the other skill, so it's just not really worth it. So once again, I would upgrade skill 1, special skill, skill 2 in terms of upgrade priority. Now, in terms of skill pages, I do think his skill page is one of the best that you can equip to him. If you are able to get it at least 2 duped, makes it a lot better. If you get it fully duped, it's really good. If you don't have it duped at all, you could run other skill pages, which are technically going to be a little bit better. I'll show you guys what those are here in a minute. But once again, besides giving you this increased speed, it's also going to give you, upon using skill 1 specifically, there is a 70% chance to attack after granting a 30% increased damage dealt buff. Now, it's not nearly that much when you don't have it duped. So right now I do have an extra 20% damage dealt buff. It's only 10% damage, which isn't as good without it duped, right? And then it's a quite a bit lower activation rate. So having 2 dupes I think is okay for the skill page. If you're able to get it, this is really good. Having it fully duped is way better because it's 50% increased damage dealt and 100% activation rate on skill 1, which is freaking nuts when you consider that his skill 1 is going to be doing all that extra damage. So like, I think it's pretty good. It's really not that bad. His skill page 1 is pretty dang decent. His skill 1 is pretty decent and his skill page is pretty decent when you put them together. Like, I think they're decent. But let me show you other options. So the first option you can run Pride of the Wizard King, which is Julius's skill page, and a lot of people have upgraded this, which is why I bring it up a lot. It gains 10 to 25% increased all attack. That'll just give Yami more attack. It's going to help him do more damage overall. Another option would be Breath of Darkness. Breath of Darkness applies 10 to 20% increased all attack to yourself as well. So you could run that, or you could run basically any other skill page that increases your attack or increases your damage done. Any of those skill pages on an attacker type unit like Yami will work, but just here's 2 examples to kind of help you get you guys started. Now, in terms of gear sets for Yami, I do like these gear sets the most. You're going to run an attack set, you're going to run a half mobility set, and you're going to run a half penetration set, all of these being gold sets, of course. What do I mean when I say gold sets for anyone who's new? If you go to sets over here, you have your attack, defense, HP, and then over here you have your attack, defense, HP, but they have gold stars. Gold sets are always better because they get better stats. So go for gold sets whenever you can in your gear. And we do have some new sets. We'll talk about those later in like a different video, but those came out with the advanced gear dungeon. But for right now, I would just run these on the new Ceremony Yami. They work pretty well, especially the penetration set, considering he has the defense penetration, he has the extra damage against defenders and stuff like that. You are going to want to run as much penetration as you can on this Yami to make him as good as possible. And then in terms of substats, what should you be going for? I would recommend, like, as much as possible, crit rate and crit damage, as well as attack. As much attack as possible realistically, but then besides that, crit rate and crit damage. I have not re-rolled any of these yet, but if you can get crit rate on Yami, that's going to help him out, just help him do more damage. And crit damage, same thing, it's just going to help him. Now, the gear pieces I have equipped here, this piece I technically need to switch out for an attack piece that goes with penetration. I would just go for all attack on the main stats, okay? So attack is the main stat for all of these gear pieces. That's what you're going to want to go for, except for this one right here, which once again needs to be switched out. But that's kind of what I do for substats. That's what I do for main stats, and those are the gear sets I would run on this Yami. Now, in terms of enhancement, is he worth getting enhanced or not? I do think he is worth getting enhanced to 2 dupes. So getting him to 2 dupes upon having 8 SPs at the start of a turn grants 100% of attack as a barrier for 1 turn. I think that's good because that means at the start of battle, he is going to have a barrier based on his attack, which is really good for helping his survivability. And then at 5 dupes, you get that same thing, but then upon having 8 SPs, grants 30% reduced damage taken, which once again is nice, but I don't feel like it's necessary for this Yami. So if you get him to at least 2 dupes, I would call it good. If you get him just a copy of him though, which is I feel like what a lot of people are going to do because Mara Leona will be coming out the same season on Global. As for Ceremony Yami's talents, this is what I was talking about when I said they're a bit weird, okay? Specifically the support tree. So the attack tree is normal. You want to go for attack plus 7% and damage dealt plus 5% just to give him as much damage as possible. You could of course always go for crit damage as well if you wanted to, or you could go for the increased crit stacking rate or I wouldn't really go for magic attack. So you could go for any of these 4 here. I would not go for the boss. I would not go for the magic attack, but I do think these 2 are the best, the attack plus 7% and damage dealt plus 5%. And then in terms of defense, I would just stick with the normal defense plus 20% and the defense stacking and crit resist stacking for defense. I do think that is best for the defense tree. And then the support tree is the weird one, okay? So the support tree, I would like to have accuracy and penetration, give him as much penetration as possible, right? Just really play off of that. So I would go for that. But then that leaves you 2 options. You can go for the debuff immunity when resisting damage, which he's an attacker, so it's like, or you could go for the 2 20% chance to reduce skill 2 cooldown. Now, I do like this because of the idea that you could bleed potentially with skill 2 and then you could stun the next turn right away with skill 2 maybe. But like in terms of how you're going to be using this Yami in PvP, you're going to be using skill 1 more than you're going to be using skill 2. You're going to be using the special more than you're going to be using skill 2, so it's not the greatest. So in this case, you can go for either. You can go for the 20% chance to reduce skill 2 cooldown, if I could speak, or you can go for the debuff immunity. That's just up to you. Or you could always go for the basic damage resist, and you could go for the special skill points back as well. So you could go for either of those. You could go for these two right here, or you could go for the accuracy and penetration with a combination of either of these, in my opinion. That's kind of what I would do for his talents. I think this is probably what I'm going to be running on his talent tree personally. But that's pretty much it for how I would build him. Now let's talk about the teams that he can fit on. Alright, so in terms of PvP teams, I do think this is a pretty decent option for Yami because you do have Fauna for nuking, you have Longris for the increased favored damage dealt, and you have him for the penetration. You also have her for the barrier, so you're getting her barriers, his barriers on top, and that's going to just give him so much survivability. We have immortality on Longris, right? We have immortality on her when she hits 5 stacks of hatred, so this team is actually pretty decent as far as mono green teams go. Now you could end up actually switching out these characters a little bit. You could run like Rill right here if you wanted to run this Yami. Besides that, I don't know if there's any other like green characters I would necessarily super want to run. Maybe you could run Vanessa right here and it work okay. Maybe you could run this Jack if you had him fully duped out. Like you could do a variety of different things, but having 3 attackers right here might be a bit crazy. But the thing is, you can run 3 attackers like this because you have this Charlotte. This Charlotte makes it possible, plus you have the extra barrier on him as well. So like, I mean, it's definitely possible to run 3 attackers like this, but like that first team I think is probably the one I would end up trying out more likely than not in PvP. Now, if you don't want to run a all mono green team in PvP, I don't think he's really going to fit onto other teams that well, to be honest, but you could do something like this. So this is a fairly common team right now, other than the fact that Yami is on it. Normally people would run like Julius, or they would take out Witch Queen and run like maybe Julius and William or something, some variation of something like this. But typically I think Julius is going to be the better attacker on this particular type of team. But you could always try to run Yami here. The thing is, Julius has an extra life, whereas Yami doesn't have immortality, he doesn't have an extra life, he doesn't have anything other than the barrier, which the barrier is good, but it's only good to an extent, right? So, I mean, like, Yami's okay, he's an okay option for a team like this, but he's really going to thrive more on the mono green team. So I would typically run him in PvP, probably more on a mono green team, especially like when Marileona comes out as a defender. It'll probably help him be a little bit more viable. Not, once again, he won't be meta, but he's definitely viable. And then for PvE, this is a team I would probably run in PvE. The reason I would run this particular team is because you have AoE, defense down, you have AoE, you have AoE, you have an AoE skill 2 with a stun. This is a very, very strong PvE team that is good for taking down enemies quickly, especially when you have multiple of them. And that's where I see this Yami really shining, is specifically because of his skill 2, his AoE, where he has that AoE stun, which could be really good. I feel like Yami could be very good for that. You could also switch out any of these units here, and you don't have to run an all mono green team for PvE. You could switch them out for a bleed character. So you could run, well, I would say red Yami. Red Yami does bleed, but you can't run 2 Yamis together. But you could run another bleed character with this Yami, and then you could like stun them turn 1, which would be nice. So you could do a variety of different things with this particular character in PvE, and I do think he is pretty good. But that's one potential team you guys could run for PvE. And that is it for Yami's build guide. If you guys did enjoy the video, please consider going down there, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.